Cybin has now been listed with NEO for a number of weeks, and a good way to start things is to ask you to tell us a little bit more about Cybin. What is Cybin exactly doing? So we know it's in the psychedelic space, we know it's a biotech company, but what is the business about? What is your mission, and what is your activity, and what have you done so far?
Thanks for the question, Jos. And I'd say that we have a pretty ambitious mission, which is trying to eradicate mental illness. So you're right. Cybin is a psychedelics company. We are developing psychedelic treatments like psilocybin to treat mental health conditions. These have the potential for truly tremendous impact on conditions like depression and addiction. There was a recent study run by Johns Hopkins University in patients with major depressive disorder using psilocybin. And in that study, 71% of patients saw a significant reduction in their depressive symptoms at 4 weeks. And this compares to about a 1/3 response that we see with current treatments available today. So you can imagine that difference, the 1/3 to 71, is truly transformative. You know, what's unique about Cybin is that we're developing our own novel sublingual formulation of psilocybin for major depressive disorder. This goes under the tongue, and it bypasses the GI tract, it bypasses the liver, and it gives us, we expect, a much faster onset of action. And that's really important for the patient and for the physician. This may be an hour faster than an oral capsule, means the physician can go on to care for other patients, and the patient that we're treating that may be depressed or anxious doesn't have to wait an hour. So we think that our approach, our formulation approach, has a real competitive advantage in the marketplace.
So psychedelics-inspired drugs, probably the right way to say it, psilocybin has a very promising, or represents a very promising opportunity to address mental health issues, and I think it's an industry that is really at the very early stages in its development, and the real outcome, of course, is to bring those products to the market, make them available. Where are you today? Where is Cybin today on that roadmap to making those drugs available? The promise is there, but when is it going to be real and accessible?
Yeah, perhaps faster than you think. We have a number of programs we can talk about, but our lead program that I'll talk about first is a phase 2 study that all the preparation is underway right now, and we're on track. And I'm happy to announce today here, Jos, that we partnered with Veristat, which is a global clinical research organization that have been responsible for thousands of clinical studies around the world. And happy to be partnering with them. They'll be supporting our study in terms of data management and biostatistics, and making sure the study is compliant and we retain the data integrity. So that study is kicking off in January. That's our goal. And we're studying this sublingual formulation in 160 patients with major depressive disorder. There are 2 parts to the study. The first part, where we're selecting the right dose and collecting some initial efficacy data, the phase 2A, will read out around the end of Q1 next year, so pretty soon. Yep. We'll have a good indication then of how things are looking. And then the phase 2 completes around the end of 2021. And I'll say that that's about 1 year faster than our competition. We're actually running our study in about half the time. And what that means is that we expect to start applying for marketing approvals in early 2022. So we could potentially have the first approved psilocybin treatment for depression on the market, globally pretty quickly.
That's impressive. And why is it that you're able to do this faster than your competitors?
We try to keep things simple. We're focusing our studies around a single site, and that way we can train the physicians and the therapists in a consistent way. Also, we're using here a Schedule 1 substance from a US point of view. So every time you move it across borders or jurisdictions or to different institutions, you need permits and licenses, et cetera. So, running a multinational study in many sites just slows things down. So we think it's important to keep things streamlined.
So that is it a fair way to say that it's focused? It's being extremely focused on one path and bringing that to the market and turning the promise into reality.
Exactly.
A question that came in the meantime, and I would like to take it because we covered that earlier. What are the benefits of the sublingual approach for the delivery? And then added to that, is this an approach that you can patent?
Yeah, so we have filed a patent around a number of delivery systems, excuse me, including sublingual. And our development partner, Intelligenics in Montreal, also has patents issued and pending around this technology. So there is IP. Now, the sublingual route makes perfect sense for psilocybin. When you give psilocybin orally, say with a capsule, it passes through the GI tract, it passes through the liver, and you lose 50 to 60% of the active drug because of that metabolism. So by delivering sublingually with a film, we can avoid that loss. It actually means we can give maybe 8 times less active ingredient, which is great, obviously from a cost point of view, but also good from a side effect point of view. You always want to give as little as you can and still be effective. And then as we talked about speed, by not having to go through the GI tract and going directly into the bloodstream through the sublingual mucosa, we think we can save about an hour in terms of onset of action. We'll see how it plays out in the clinic, but certainly a very rapid onset.
Yep. So the next question I have for you, and you already gave a couple of answers: time to market, focus, unique delivery mechanism. But if I would compare you to the other serious names that are out there in the market, whether listed on NEO or listed on Nasdaq, that are also in the psychedelics inspired biotech space, how would you define yourself in comparison to them? What makes you unique? What makes you different? What do potential future customers, but probably more importantly on this call, what do investors need to know about you that makes you so different?
Well, first of all, let me say that all the work that's being done in this space is very important. And the progress that companies like Compass Pathways and MindMed are making is good for patients, it's good for the science. It'll help progress these treatments to market and help people in need. If we're looking at comparisons, Compass is also developing a psilocybin oral capsule. As I mentioned, we're developing a sublingual film, which we expect to have that competitive advantage of being faster in terms of onset. MindMed is also looking at a number of different molecules, and that's certainly in our sights as we look forward here. We recently closed an oversubscribed financing round, so we're well capitalized today, which is good in these uncertain times, of course. But it also means we have a war chest for M&A, and we have a very active M&A pipeline. The near-term focus of our M&A activity is adding novel molecules and diversifying our portfolio, adding to psilocybin and bringing in new IP and new indications. We're looking at second generation psychedelic molecules with improved treatment profiles. So we're talking about things, properties like a shorter duration of action, smoother pharmacokinetic profile, which means fewer side effects, and more scalable treatments. And we think that adding these types of assets adds a lot of value to Cybin and also for shareholders. In addition to that, I think in the near future, we can see expanding our discovery and our development capabilities through acquisition, adding scientific depth to the business. We're working on a number of collaborations and partnerships with private companies and with research institutions, potentially adding new clinical programs. We're looking at novel supportive deliveries. So we have a pretty active couple of months ahead of us, we think.
Yeah, I was going to ask you the question, and I think you kind of covered it already to a certain degree, and so I'm going to push you a little bit further now, of course. But I was going to ask you about, we see who you are today, we see what makes you unique, and I was going to say, so what is a strategy forward? And I think where you talk about a war chest, you got lots of ideas from an M&A perspective. Is there anything more concrete that you can tell us? Like, are we going to see some announcements coming soon? And considering all the various types of initiatives that you are contemplating, whether it's new molecules, whether it's certain types of partnerships, is there a prioritization? Like, how do you prioritize those opportunities, and how does that fit in an overall strategy?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first priority, number one, is keeping our current lead program on track, and that obviously we have to execute versus the plan. Number two is diversifying the portfolio, adding those novel molecules, and then beyond that, we're looking at creating a larger ecosystem of support, both internally in terms of adding clinical and scientific expertise, but also through collaborations. It's important that we collaborate with universities and experts in the field as we try to build an ecosystem so we can bring these treatments into the clinic and then to market. So these are all kind of interwoven. I certainly expect to see some announcements before year end. And then, of course, as we get into the new year, we're looking to start our clinical study and then phase 2A results around the end of the first quarter. So I think we'll see a lot of news between now and end of quarter one.
That's very cool. And even between now and year end, you say. So
fingers crossed.
Make sure we all keep our eyes open. A couple of questions came in. One that I'm going to take immediately because it fits a bit in, business of today, strategy going forward. One of the participants in the audience mentions that the investor deck was talking about a nutraceutical line. Sorry, it's not so easy to say for me with my accent. That would be hitting the market about now. What is going on with that line of products?
Yeah, I'd say actually that as we think about products for consumers, so non-pharmaceutical products, we've broadened our thinking somewhat. And we see an opportunity to bring a whole spectrum of services and products for mental wellness. A lot of these products and services exist, but they're not necessarily in one place for a consumer that may be curious about their mental health or concerned about their mental wellness and want to make sure that they're taking supplements or nutraceuticals, or maybe doing meditation or getting therapy, the kind of things we should all be doing today to take care of our mind. So we're working on something a little larger than just the nutraceuticals. They're an important part of our range, and we've done a lot of work on that product line. So I'd say watch this space, and we'll make some announcements as things are ready.
Okay, so that is in the pipeline and soon to come. Coming back to a comment that you made earlier about your financial strength, the capital that you raised, and your pre-go public private placement was substantially oversubscribed, and those are figures that I don't think are public, but it was pretty impressive. Question that I want to tie back to a question put forward by Alex. I'll give his first name as I see it in front of me. If you look at the psychedelic space now and the environment in which it is operating and developing, how would you compare it to the cannabis space? And is there any lessons from the cannabis space that you have learned and that you are considering and looking at applying in the further development of this company in this industry, which is a very different industry, but I'm sure that there's things that can be learned over there, and definitely some key differences that I can see.
Yeah, look, I think there's been some initial interest in the psychedelic space based upon the popularity and the success of cannabis investments and some of the spikes that we saw in those early investments. And I'm sure that some of that capital has moved into the psychedelic space early on. I do see there's a shift already, though. I mean, for a start, I would characterize psychedelics as being very different to cannabinoids. Cannabis has shown to have a broad recreational use and large market there, but from a pharmaceutical point of view, has proven to be challenging to develop because of the entourage effects and having to develop combination products, which is not easy. With psychedelics, you have a very small, if any, recreational market at all, and 50 years of scientific data, thousands of clinical studies from institutions like Johns Hopkins and NYU and Imperial College in London that mean that as we are developing products here, we have that whole bedrock of scientific data that decreases the development risk and shortens our development timelines and makes them faster to market and less expensive to deliver. In terms of investments, we're already seeing a shift away from the cannabis 2.0 investors, if you'd like to use that phrase. First, you're seeing Compass Pathways listing on the NASDAQ. That's a pretty big indicator of interest of institutional investors. And I can tell you that in our last financing round, as you mentioned, it was oversubscribed. 95% of the investments in that round came from US blue chip biotech funds. So we're not talking about cannabis investors. We're talking about very smart biotech investors that did their due diligence on the team and on the science and on the products. And we've been very humbled to have those folks in our book.
Yeah, I think that is definitely one of the besides the scientific bedrock, as you called it, but one of the elements that I clearly see, at the level of the exchange with your organization, and you mentioned MindMed earlier, and Pathways, just by the mere fact that they are listed in the US. That is that the investor community in this industry is very different. Cannabis has been largely driven by what I would probably call a subset of the investor community, call it family offices, call it retail investors, high net worths, individuals. Here you really see the institutional investor stepping in at an early stage, and I think that represents a fundamental difference, and it will happen in the US. It will happen in I believe in the cannabis space also, but it's still going to take time. And I think it's definitely one of the very positive elements about the psychedelic space. That is that they are there, and that is, as you said, sophisticated investors. That is smart money, and they tend to know what they do, and they do very in-depth analysis before they invest in corporations and organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say just one parallel I will draw with the cannabis space is that we saw that companies that were well capitalized early were able to consolidate other smaller companies and grow and form a strong base. And that's why it was important for us to attract strong investors early on, to be well capitalized. And now I think we're in a good position to take advantage of many smaller companies in this space that are starting, that have good ideas and good technology, but perhaps don't have the capital to grow. So that's an opportunity for us, I think.
So, do you see yourself a bit with your war chest, with your vision? Do you see yourself a bit as a consolidator in this space? Then is that a fair way to look, a good way to look at it?
I think it's a natural consequence of being well capitalized. When you start to have a small number of companies already with pretty decent market caps and well capitalized, and then we see lots of small companies starting with very small rounds, $2, $3, $4, $5 million rounds, and that's just not going to cut it in drug development. Quite honestly, drug development is very expensive, and so the exciting opportunity for us is we see those teams of scientists and inventors getting started, and then we can, with our capital and with our team, help them bring those products further into the clinic.
Yeah. And what are your fears and what are your thoughts? Something we've seen in the cannabis space, and I see it a little bit emerging now in this industry also, around those companies that are just trying to follow the hype. And what would be your recommendation here to investors? So you are, like the other two names you mentioned earlier, you're a highly capitalized, serious player with vision, with the team. And I want to come back a bit to the team. It's probably worthwhile to talk about that. But I also see all kinds of other companies emerging, and there's not much behind it. What are your thoughts about that? What are your recommendations? And do you think there's a risk that we're going to see some of those companies again emerging that are there just to take advantage of investors?
I think there's always a little bit of that. People will be opportunistic, but I think the market is pretty efficient and will weed out those types of companies. And I think if I was a retail investor, and you're unsure, I would say follow the smart money. And so if you've had companies that have been vetted by major institutional investors, then you may be in a slightly safer situation than if you're just randomly looking at sort of retail investing opportunities.
I think that's a great point, Doug, and I think that is a message, and that's also a message that we as an exchange will give to our issuers. That is to communicate about that and be transparent about that, because what you want to avoid is that repeat. So if I look at the cannabis space today, it is going through a big cleanup, and you see the quality firms emerging. But there has been a lot of companies there that should never have been public or should not have been accessible to retail investors. And I think we have the benefit here that there is institutional presence and strong interest. And I think it's important that companies communicate about that, because it's definitely, as you said, a key differentiator. The other key differentiator for me, and that is whether it is in this industry or any other industry, is the quality of the team, the quality of the people behind an organization. Like, when I look at investing in companies, that is one of the core factors that I take into consideration. Could you tell us a little bit about your team?
Yeah, and I think that's a good philosophy always. I've always said better to invest in an A team with a B idea than a B team with an A idea. Always good to focus on the folks that are going to execute. I personally have been in healthcare for 30 years. I spent a lot of time in M&A in my early career. I was at a large multinational called Activist Group in the mid-2000s, and we bought 15 companies over a 4-year period, which is pretty aggressive, on 3 different continents. Ended up with a business that was operating in 70 countries. So that was a lot of fun. And for the last dozen years, I've been the CEO of 3 different companies. One I helped co-found in early 2008 that we grew to about $500 million in revenues in 5 years, and in 35 countries. Another company, a NASDAQ company, I was the chairman and CEO of, which was a recapitalization and turnaround situation. So strong leadership for experience across a few different sectors. Our chief medical officer has 25 years of experience developing drugs in this space, in the psychiatry and neurology space, at companies like Eli Lilly and BioVale. And we have other strong supporters and team members. For example, on the government relations front, and obviously policy is important here. Eric Hoskins, who's the former Ontario Minister of Health, is on our board. So we're really we've really managed to build a very strong team, both from a scientific point of view, marketing point of view, and from a policy point of view. So yeah, very proud of the team, and I think it's clear to say that without them, we wouldn't have attracted the strong interest from investors that we saw in the last round.
Yeah, and I can only but underscore that and recommend to everyone to have a look at your website. And there's another expertise that you didn't mention, and that's also on that website. But you also have strong capital markets expertise and advisors around you, and I think that is very important also. I never say it enough, but going public is not just something you do in one day and then things are going to be fine. Going public is something that needs attention. You need to pay attention to the markets. You need to understand them, and you need to have people who are there to communicate and to make sure that you really leverage all the benefits of being a public organization or public corporation.
Yeah, you're right, Jos. It's the financial and legal mechanics of going public are somewhat of a chore, but they have to be done. Our internal team was fantastic. We were supported by strong advisors and attorneys and counsel, of course, but our internal team drove the time process very aggressively. I think we listed in pretty record time.
Yeah. Oh, I know. A couple of questions that I would like to take, and I'm gonna take questions from people that I think I didn't put forward yet. One of the questions, speaking of Nasdaq, you are now listed on NEO. You are gonna be available very soon, I believe, for trading on OTC markets in the US. And you're going to be available on the Frankfurt OTC market. And by the way, there was a question that came in that I should probably answer. Someone asked, I'm EU resident, how can I trade? How can I buy shares in Cybin? Well, it's fairly simple. If you are a client in a dealer, you work with an advisor, whatever it is, you're an institutional investor, you go to your normal channels and they will be able to take care of that for you. If you are using a discount brokerage platform, thinking about a Toro or another product in Europe, as soon as the Cybin is available for trading on one of the German exchanges, and I think Frankfurt is the one where it will be the case, you can trade, you will get your data from there, and you can immediately trade on it without any restrictions. And that's the same, by the way, for retail investors in the US. Access to trading is straightforward. If you use a discount brokerage platform, as soon as it's on OTC markets, and that's a matter of, I think, weeks, if not days, you will see all the quotes and you will be able to easily buy Cybin security. So that's a straightforward process. But coming back to the question, so NEO, senior exchange in Canada, then you are available for trading on OTC markets very shortly. Are you looking at a potential uplisting in the US from OTC markets to Nasdaq, and then combining that dual listing NEO Nasdaq environment?
Yeah, look, I think if you're in drug development, then the Nasdaq is where you need to be in terms of getting access to the right kind of capital. And part of our decision to partner with NEO was the quality of the exchange and the ability to cross this on Nasdaq later. Clearly, we have an outside timeline of a year for seasoning, right? We could list maximally within a year, and we have an opportunity to list sooner than that if we file the appropriate documentation. I think it really just comes down to timing of progress in our clinical studies and the right time to do that. But it's certainly in our sights, absolutely.
Let's take a few more questions. What do you think are the major roadblocks for the industry, and how are you planning to get beyond them?
Yeah, I think it's important to tread somewhat cautiously, right? When we look back at some of the mistakes we made in the past in psychedelics, and it put these molecules on the shelf for 50 years, and that's a real shame. It's deprived people in need of these treatments for all that time. And so as we see a wave of decriminalization happening, which, by the way, I think is fantastic. I don't think we should be putting people in jail for having natural ingredients in their pockets. But we also need to tread carefully and let science lead the way. And encouraged by measures like Measure 109 in Oregon, where they've thoughtfully put in a process over a 2-year period to create a mental health framework, a regulatory framework, that allows the safe administration of these molecules in a regulated way. And I think if we tread carefully like that and sort of facilitate and enable good experiences and collect good data, make sure that patients are safe, that the quality metrics are in place, and we show good efficacy, then I think we're setting these treatments up for success. Whether it's Cybin or any other company, the important thing is these treatments come to market in a smart way. And I think if we keep doing that, then we'll see regulators continuing to give support to those programs.
Doug, it's amazing. Time flies by, and the questions keep pouring in. So clearly, you got the eye of the investors, and I'll maybe very rapidly take two more questions and ask you for a rapid answer on them. First one: how easy is it to transfer the trials in Jamaica into the FDA framework?
Oh yeah, we've designed those studies with FDA in mind. So we've used FDA consultants, long time, 25-year FDA veterans actually, to make sure those protocols are fully FDA compliant and they're operated under good clinical practice and ICH guidelines. So we don't do things in a vacuum. So we fully expect to utilize this phase 2 study for FDA purposes.
Thank you very much. I think that should reassure the person who answered that question. Then one that I will put forward to you, where I have absolutely no knowledge of what the question is, but I'm sure you will. Do you think messenger RNA will play a role in the use of psychedelics?
I have no idea.
Okay, I find it a very sophisticated question, so I thought I'm going to ask it and sound smart, but I guess
I'll just say, Jos, it's not an area that we're focusing on right now. I think there are a lot of opportunities, in this space to take different directions. Conditions like depression and addiction and PTSD are broad-reaching, and I think any approach that has the potential to help people with those conditions not only is a great help to society, but obviously an enormous economic opportunity as well.
Cool. One quick question that I maybe want to address. Cybin is not currently traded on OTC, but someone sees a symbol over there. Just to clarify, indeed, the comments that I made, OTC markets has different segments, and Cybin today is in what we call the pink market. But what you really want is it to be on one of the OTC major segments, that is OTC QX or OTC QB, because that is where the data will be available to the retail discount brokerage platforms in the US. And you also want Cybin to be settling through DTC in the US, and that is what's going to happen all very soon, and that's going to create a very efficient market on OTC markets in the US. Last question, Doug, and we're going to close with that. Why did you list on NEO?
Primarily because they had the best looking CEO in all the exchanges, in Canada, Jos.
I get that.
No, with all seriousness, your team is very professional, very welcoming, high energy, and we also we like that the NEO is really focused on innovative companies like us, and also has high corporate governance standards. So that's a good fit for us all around.
Yep. Well, thank you very much for those words. And I'm not talking about the looks. I'm talking about the other comments about NEO. And I think indeed it's also going to be very helpful because of what you said to achieve further down the road that cross listing or that dual listing with Nasdaq, which is another accelerator. Sorry. Of your business and the quality and liquidity of your market. Doug, thank you very much for your time. This was very fast, or it felt like it went very fast. Thank you for your open and transparent responses, and I'm sure many more questions will follow. So if anyone has questions, you can go to the Cybin website, or you can reach out to us. We'll pass them on to Doug and his team. And looking forward to be a part of your journey that I have no doubts will be full of major milestones and success, and will deliver on that promise of psychedelics addressing some of the major mental health issues that we have. Thank you, Doug.